You'd think after raising 3 kids that weren't even mine, I'd have learned to keep my mouth shut about family business. But here I am, 52 years old, sitting in my cramped Denver apartment with the radiator clanking like a broken-down train, staring at my sister's latest text message that calls me everything but a child of God. The irony isn't lost on me. Linda always said I'd never understand what it meant to be a real parent. Turns out she was right, just not the way she meant it. Real parents don't abandon their children at a Denny's parking lot because the electricity got shut off again. Real parents don't blame their 8-year-old for ruining their life when a welfare check runs out. I'm a high school guidance counselor, which means I've seen every kind of family mess you can imagine. But nothing prepared me for the day my phone rang 15 years ago, and it was little Marcus on the other end, whispering that mommy left them alone again and they were scared. The November wind rattles my windows now, and I can almost hear that same frightened voice asking if I'm coming to get them. Linda had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. 3 years younger than me, blessed with their blue eyes and easy charm, she glided through life expecting everything to work out simply because she was Linda. I was the responsible one, the plain one, the one who got good grades and never caused trouble. When she got pregnant at 19 with Marcus, our parents rallied around her like she discovered the cure for cancer. They threw her a baby shower, helped with the rent, babysat while she found herself. When she had Sophia 2 years later, and then little Emma 3 years after that, they called it beautiful. Linda creating her own little family. I was 28 then, working my way through graduate school, living in a studio apartment that smelled like the fish market downstairs. I visited when I could, bringing diapers and formula, watching Linda's eyes glaze over when the kids cried. She'd hand them to me with this look, part relief, part resentment, like I was taking something from her just by being capable. Our parents died in a car accident when Emma was 4. Linda fell apart. Not the pretty kind of falling apart that gets you sympathy and casseroles. The ugly kind that involves 3-day benders and leaving children to fend for themselves. The first time I got the call, I thought it was a mistake. Marcus was 10, old enough to know how to dial 911, but he called me instead. He'd found my number written on a napkin in Linda's purse, probably from the last time I'd visited and tried to have a serious conversation about responsibility. He said Linda had been gone for 2 days. Emma was crying because she was hungry, and Sophia was trying to make cereal, but they were out of milk. The apartment was cold because the heat had been turned off, and Marcus had been putting extra blankets on his sisters at night, telling them stories to keep them from asking where mommy went. I drove across town in my beat-up Honda, stopping at the grocery store for milk and bread and whatever else I could think of. When I got there, I found 3 kids who looked like they'd been surviving on crackers and hope. Emma ran to me like I was her salvation, and Sophia, always the serious one, just stared at me with those dark eyes that seemed too old for her 7-year-old face. Marcus tried to explain where Linda might be, making excuses with the loyalty only children can muster for parents who don't deserve it. I didn't have the heart to tell him I knew exactly where she was, probably passed out in some guy's apartment, or worse. Linda came home 3 days later, makeup smeared, reeking of cigarettes and cheap perfume, with a story about helping a friend through a crisis. She found me on her couch, Emma curled up next to me watching cartoons, and her face went through about 5 different emotions before settling on indignant rage. She accused me of overreacting, of trying to make her look bad, of never understanding what it was like to be a single mother. The kids scattered to their rooms like mice when cats fight. And Linda and I had it out in whispers in her kitchen while the bacon I'd been cooking for their breakfast grew cold on the stove. I told her this couldn't happen again. She told me to mind my own business. I told her these children needed stability. She told me if I was so worried about it, maybe I should have had kids of my own instead of judging her choices. The thing is, I had wanted kids. I've been engaged once to a guy named David who taught history at the community college. We talked about having 2 kids, getting a house with a yard, all the normal dreams people have. But David couldn't handle the way Linda's crises kept interrupting our plans, the way I'd drop everything when she needed help. He said I'd always choose her over him. And honestly, he was probably right. After he left, I threw myself into work and told myself I was better off alone. The calls became more frequent after that. Sometimes it was Marcus. Sometimes it was Sophia. Occasionally, it was a neighbor who'd heard the kids crying and didn't know what else to do. I became the unofficial emergency contact for 3 children who weren't mine, driving across town at all hours to check on them, to feed them, to make sure they were safe. Linda would disappear for days at a time, then show up with gifts and promises and tears, swearing she'd changed. The kids would light up when she came home, forgiving her instantly the way children do, and I'd watch her bask in their love while knowing she'd break their hearts again within a week. I started keeping a bag packed in my car, extra clothes for the kids, snacks, a first aid kit. My principal at school noticed I was calling in sick more often, but I couldn't explain that I was raising 3 children part-time while their mother played house with whatever guy caught her fancy that month. The apartment I shared with them during Linda's absences was a study in controlled chaos. Homework spread across my coffee table, Disney movies playing on repeat, the smell of mac and cheese permanently embedded in my couch cushions. I learned to braid hair from YouTube videos, figured out how to talk to teenagers about their problems, discovered that I was actually pretty good at this parenting thing I'd never planned to do. But Linda always came back, always reclaimed them, always made me feel like I was overstepping some invisible boundary. The breaking point came when Emma was 8. Linda had been gone for a week, and I'd been staying at her place because the kids needed stability, needed to sleep in their own beds. I'd taken time off work, called in every favor I had, and was running on coffee and determination. Emma had been running a fever, nothing serious, but she was clingy and scared. She'd been calling me Mama for months, which broke my heart every time because I knew Linda would explode if she heard it. I was giving Emma medicine and reading her stories when Linda walked in with some man I'd never seen before, both of them clearly high on something stronger than alcohol. The fight that followed was the worst we'd ever had. Linda screamed that I was trying to steal her children, that I was poisoning them against her, that I had no right to play house with her family. The man she brought home made some crude comment about 2 sisters fighting over kids, and I lost it completely. I told Linda everything I'd been holding back for years, how she was selfish and irresponsible, how she was damaging these beautiful children, how they deserved better than a mother who saw them as obligations instead of blessings. I told her I was done cleaning up her messes, done being her safety net, done watching her break her children's hearts over and over again. She told me to get out and never come back. I packed my things and left, believing I was doing the right thing. Maybe Linda needed to hit rock bottom before she could change. Maybe the kids would be better off if I stopped enabling her bad choices. Maybe I needed to focus on my own life for once. I lasted 2 days before Marcus called me, crying. Linda had brought strangers to the house, and they were doing things that scared him. Sophia was hiding in her room with Emma, and he didn't know what to do. In the background, I could hear loud music and voices, the sound of adults who'd forgotten there were children in the house. I hung up and called Child Protective Services. It was the hardest phone call I'd ever made, but I knew it was the right one. These children deserved safety, deserved someone who would put their needs first, deserved a chance at a normal life. I couldn't keep pretending that Linda would change, couldn't keep patching up the damage she caused. When the social worker arrived at Linda's apartment, she found the kids locked in Sophia's room, while Linda and 3 other adults partied in the living room. There were drugs on a coffee table, empty bottles everywhere, and Emma was crying because she was hungry and no one had fed her dinner. The children were removed that night. I got the call at 2 a.m. from the social worker, asking if I could take temporary custody while they figured out what to do next. The emergency custody hearing was held on a Tuesday morning in a courtroom that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Linda showed up 20 minutes late, wearing sunglasses and yesterday's clothes, with a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I sat with the kids, Marcus holding Emma on his lap, while Sophia pressed close to my side. They were scared and confused, caught between loving their mother and needing safety. The judge was kind but firm, asking questions about Linda's history, about my relationship with the children, about what I thought was best for them. Linda's lawyer argued that she'd made mistakes but deserved a chance to get her children back. He talked about the sacred bond between mother and child, about how families should be kept together whenever possible. He made me sound like an interfering busybody who'd manipulated the situation for my own gain. My lawyer was a tired-looking woman named Janet who'd been handling family cases for 20 years. She presented the facts simply. Linda had a history of abandoning her children, had exposed them to drugs and dangerous situations, had shown no genuine commitment to change. The children were thriving in my care, saw me as their primary caregiver, and deserved stability. The judge awarded me temporary custody and ordered Linda to complete a rehabilitation program before she could regain her parental rights. She stormed out of the courtroom, but not before telling me I'd regret this, that I'd stolen her children and ruined her life. Raising 3 children as a single woman in her late 30s was like jumping into the deep end of a pool you didn't know existed. Suddenly, my quiet apartment became a headquarters for homework help, soccer practice, and teenage drama. I traded my Honda for a minivan, learned to shop at Costco, and discovered that children go through clothes faster than I went through coffee. Marcus was the easiest transition. He'd been acting as the parent for so long that having an actual adult take responsibility was a relief. He threw himself into school, made friends, joined the debate team. Sometimes I catch him looking at me with this expression of pure gratitude that made my heart ache. Sophia was the observer, the one who watched everything and said little. She'd been protecting her siblings for years, and learning to be a child again was harder than I'd expected. She had nightmares about Linda coming to take them away, about me leaving them like their mother had. It took months of consistent bedtimes and home-cooked meals before she started to relax. Emma was my shadow, the one who needed constant reassurance that I wasn't going anywhere. She'd been 4 when I got custody, and she adapted the fastest but also held on the tightest. Every day when I picked her up from school, she'd run to me like she'd been afraid I wouldn't come back. The financial strain was real. I'd gone from supporting myself to supporting 4 people on a guidance counselor's salary. But somehow we made it work with thrift store shopping, home-cooked meals, and a lot of creativity. Linda's rehabilitation program lasted 6 months, but her commitment to change lasted about 6 weeks. She'd show up for her court-ordered visits smelling like alcohol, making promises she had no intention of keeping. The kids would come home from these visits confused and upset, and I'd spend hours talking them through their feelings about a mother who said she loved them but couldn't stop hurting them. After a year, the judge terminated Linda's parental rights. She didn't fight it, just signed the papers with a shrug and told anyone who'd listen that she was better off without the burden of 3 ungrateful children. I legally adopted them 6 months later, in a ceremony that was both the happiest and saddest day of my life. Marcus was 13 by then, Sophia 11, Emma 7. They'd been living with me for 2 years, and I was no longer their emergency guardian. I was their mother in every way that mattered. They call me Mom now, easily and naturally, and I'd stop correcting them. Linda moved to California, chasing some man who'd promised her a fresh start. She sent Christmas cards for a while, addressed to the kids with no return address. Then even those stopped coming. For 5 years, we heard nothing from her. The kids grew up, started high school, learned to drive, fell in love, broke up, applied to colleges. Normal kid stuff, the kind of boring, beautiful routine that I'd once thought I'd never have. Marcus graduated valedictorian from high school and got a full scholarship to study engineering at Colorado State. Sophia was accepted to nursing school, and Emma was showing promise as an artist. I was proud of them in a way that only a parent can be. Proud of their achievements, but more proud of who they'd become despite everything they'd been through. Marcus was working 2 part-time jobs while in college, sending money home to help with household expenses. He said it was the least he could do after everything I'd done for them. Sophia did the same when she started working as a nurse, and Emma sold her artwork at local galleries, insisting on contributing to what she called the family fund. I tried to tell them they didn't owe me anything, that raising them had been a privilege, not a burden. But they were determined to help, to give back, to show their appreciation in the only way they knew how. It was touching and unnecessary and completely characteristic of the generous, thoughtful people they become. We were a family in every sense of the word. Not the traditional nuclear family I'd once imagined, but something better. Something chosen and fought for and treasured. Then Linda came back. She showed up at my door on a Tuesday evening in March, 15 pounds heavier and 10 years older, with bleached hair and a story about getting her life together. She'd been clean for a year, she said. She'd been working at a diner in Sacramento, saving money, going to meetings. She wanted to see her children. I stood in my doorway, looking at this woman who'd given birth to my children but had never been their mother, and felt my protective instincts kick in like a mama bear confronting a threat. Linda's timing was perfect in the worst possible way. Marcus had just gotten his first real job as a junior engineer. Sophia was working nights at the hospital, and Emma had won a scholarship to art school. They were successful, happy, and grateful, and Linda saw dollar signs. She didn't want to reconnect with her children out of love or remorse. She wanted to cash in on their success, to claim credit for how well they turned out, to position herself as the victim who'd been kept from her babies by her jealous sister. The first time she saw Marcus, she cried crocodile tears and told him how sorry she was, how she'd thought about him every day, how she'd only given up her rights because she'd thought it was best for him. She'd changed, she said. She was ready to be the mother she should have been all along. Marcus, who'd grown into a kind and forgiving young man, wanted to believe her. He invited her to dinner, listened to her stories about getting clean, even offered to help her find an apartment nearby. But he was also smart enough to see through her act. Sophia was less charitable. She'd always been the most realistic about Linda's failures. And she wasn't interested in pretending their mother had become someone she wasn't. She was polite but distant, civil but not welcoming. Emma, who barely remembered Linda, was mostly confused. This woman claimed to be her mother, but Mom was the one who'd bandaged her scraped knees and helped with homework and celebrated every small victory. This stranger was just that, a stranger who happened to share some DNA. Linda's demands started small. She needed help with rent, just until she got back on her feet. She needed a car, something reliable to get to work. She needed clothes, furniture, the basics of setting up a life. And who better to help than her successful children, who owed everything to her? When the kid said no, she turned to manipulation. She reminded Marcus of how much she'd loved him as a baby, how she'd sacrificed everything for her children. She told Sophia that a good daughter would want to help her mother, that family was supposed to stick together. She cried to Emma about how hard it had been to give up her rights, how she'd only done it because she'd thought it was best for them. None of it worked. These weren't the scared, desperate children she'd abandoned. They were adults who'd learned to see through manipulation, who'd been raised by someone who valued honesty over emotional blackmail. So Linda changed tactics. She started telling people that I'd stolen her children, that I'd brainwashed them against her, that I was keeping them from their rightful inheritance. She claimed that their success was built on money that should have been hers, that I'd manipulated the system to take advantage of a woman who'd been struggling with addiction. The story she told made me the villain and her the victim, and she was convincing enough that some people believed her. But the kids knew better. They'd lived through her abandonment, had clear memories of being hungry and scared and alone. They weren't about to rewrite history to make Linda feel better about her choices. The breaking point came when Linda showed up at Marcus's apartment, drunk and belligerent, demanding that he give her money she claimed he owed her. She'd been drinking for hours, working herself into a rage about how ungrateful her children were, how they'd forgotten everything she'd done for them. Marcus called me, shaken and angry. Linda had screamed at him in front of his neighbors, called him names, threatened to cause problems at his job if he didn't start supporting her. She claimed that everything he'd achieved was built on her sacrifice, that he was stealing from her by not sharing his success. I drove over to find Linda passed out in the hallway outside his apartment, reeking of alcohol and self-pity. The neighbors had called the police, and she was arrested for public intoxication and harassment. Marcus was embarrassed and hurt, but also relieved that other people had witnessed her behavior. When Linda sobered up, she blamed me for turning her children against her. She said I'd poisoned them with lies, that I'd stolen their love and their money. She threatened to take me to court to prove that I'd manipulated the adoption process, to expose me as the fraud she claimed I was. But the truth was simple. I'd been there when she wasn't. I'd raised her children when she couldn't. I'd given them love and stability and a chance at a normal life. No amount of revisionist history could change those facts. The kids were furious with Linda, but they were also hurt. They'd hoped, despite everything, that their biological mother had genuinely changed. Finding out she only wanted them for their money was devastating in a way that her original abandonment hadn't been. Linda's final attempt at manipulation was also her most desperate. She contacted a local news station with a sob story about a mother who'd lost her children to an overzealous sister and was now being denied access to her grandchildren. She painted herself as a victim of the system, a woman who'd made mistakes but deserved forgiveness. The reporter who contacted me was young and eager, looking for a story about family dysfunction and redemption. I agreed to meet with her, but I also insisted that she talk to the kids, that she get the full story before she decided what to report. Marcus, Sophia, and Emma sat in my living room and told their stories calmly and clearly. They talked about being left alone for days, about being hungry and scared, about not knowing if their mother was coming back. They talked about the stability I'd provided, the love I'd shown them, the way I'd put their needs first. They also talked about Linda's recent behavior, her demands for money, her attempts to manipulate them. They showed the reporter text messages and emails, evidence of Linda's true motivations. The reporter left without a story. There was no scandal here, no injustice to expose. Just a woman who'd done what needed to be done for 3 children who'd needed her. Linda was furious when the story didn't run. She accused me of bribing the reporter, of using my connections to suppress the truth. But the truth was simple. The reporter had done her job and found that Linda's version of events didn't match reality. I thought Linda's silence after the failed news story meant she'd given up, but I was wrong. She was regrouping, planning her next move. She contacted a lawyer who specialized in family reunification cases, someone who'd made a career out of helping parents regain custody of their children. The lawyer sent me a letter threatening to challenge the adoption, claiming that Linda had been coerced into giving up her parental rights. He argued that she'd been suffering from addiction-related mental health issues and couldn't make informed decisions about her children's future. It was a desperate move, legally speaking. The adoption had been finalized years ago, and Linda had voluntarily signed away her rights after failing to complete court-ordered rehabilitation. But the threat was real enough to require a response. I hired my own lawyer, a woman who specialized in defending adoptions against frivolous challenges. She reviewed the case files, interviewed the kids, and prepared a defense that would show Linda's true motivations. The kids were adults now, old enough to speak for themselves in court if necessary. They were also tired of Linda's manipulation, tired of being treated like pawns in her game. They wrote letters to the court explaining their position, their feelings about the adoption, and their desire to be left alone. Marcus's letter was particularly powerful. He wrote about the night he'd called me, scared and hungry, and how I'd dropped everything to help them. He wrote about the stability I'd provided, the love I'd shown them, the way I'd always put their needs first. He wrote about Linda's recent behavior and her obvious motivation for challenging the adoption. The court hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late summer. Linda showed up with her lawyer, dressed conservatively and looking like she'd been coached on how to present herself. She'd lost weight, done something different with her hair, and was clearly trying to project an image of stability and responsibility. I sat with my lawyer, flanked by 3 adult children who'd chosen to be there despite having no legal obligation to attend. Marcus had taken time off work, Sophia had switched shifts at the hospital, and Emma had driven up from art school. They were there to support me, but also to support each other. Linda's lawyer presented her case first, arguing that she'd been a victim of circumstances, that she'd been struggling with addiction and mental health issues when she'd signed away her rights. He painted a picture of a woman who'd been manipulated by a system that favored her sister, who'd been denied the chance to be a mother to her children. My lawyer's response was devastating in its simplicity. She presented the facts: Linda's history of abandonment, her failure to complete rehabilitation, her recent demands for money from her children. She played recordings of Linda's voicemails, read her text messages, showed evidence of her true motivations. But the most powerful testimony came from the kids themselves. They'd asked to speak, and the judge allowed it. One by one, they stood up and told their stories. They talked about what their childhood had been like with Linda, what their life had been like with me, and what Linda's recent behavior had shown them about her character. Emma's testimony was particularly moving. She looked directly at Linda and said, "You may have given birth to me, but you were never my mother. My mom is the one who raised me, who loved me, who was there when I needed her. You're just a stranger who wants my money." The judge dismissed Linda's challenge without hesitation. She ruled that the adoption had been conducted properly, that Linda had voluntarily relinquished her rights, and that there was no evidence of coercion or misconduct. She also noted that the children were adults who'd clearly stated their position, and that their wishes should be respected. Linda stormed out of the courtroom, but not before making one final scene. She screamed that I'd stolen her children, that I'd ruined her life, that I'd brainwashed them against her. She accused the judge of bias, the system of corruption, and me of being a manipulative monster who destroyed her family. The kids were embarrassed, but not surprised. They'd seen Linda's true colors too many times to be shocked by her behavior. They were also relieved that it was over, that they could move on with their lives without the threat of Linda's legal challenges hanging over them. We left the courthouse together, for people who'd chosen to be a family despite having no biological obligation to each other. We went to lunch at a little restaurant downtown, celebrating not just our legal victory, but our emotional one. We'd survived Linda's manipulation, her attempts to rewrite history, and her efforts to cash in on our success. Marcus raised his glass of soda and proposed a toast to the woman who chose to be our mother when our biological mother chose to abandon us. To the woman who put our needs first, who loved us unconditionally, and who showed us what real family looks like. To Mom. Sophia and Emma raised their glasses too, and I felt tears in my eyes as I looked at these 3 amazing people who'd given my life meaning and purpose. Linda left Denver the next day, but not before making one last attempt to contact the kids. She sent each of them a long, rambling email that was part apology, part manipulation, and part threat. She claimed she'd always loved them, that she'd made mistakes but deserved forgiveness, and that they'd regret cutting her out of their lives. The kids shared the emails with me, laughing at Linda's dramatics, but also feeling sad about what might have been. They'd hoped, despite everything, that their biological mother would eventually become someone they could have a relationship with. Finding out she only saw them as sources of income was heartbreaking, but they were also grateful for the clarity. There was no more wondering what if, no more hoping Linda would change, no more guilt about their feelings toward her. She'd shown them exactly who she was, and they could move forward without looking back. Life settled into a new normal after that. Marcus got promoted at work and started dating a sweet girl from his church. Sophia was accepted into a graduate program in nursing administration. Emma's artwork was featured in a gallery show, and she sold 3 pieces in one night. They continued to help me financially, despite my protests. They said it was their way of showing gratitude, of giving back to the woman who'd given them everything. They called it their family fund, money set aside to help with household expenses, to take family vacations, to make sure I was taken care of as I got older. It was more than I'd ever expected, more than I'd ever dreamed of when I was 37 and single, thinking I'd miss my chance at having a family. I'm 52 now, sitting in my living room on a Sunday afternoon, watching Marcus help Emma hang her latest painting while Sophia makes dinner in the kitchen. The radiator still clanks, the windows still rattle in the wind. But this apartment has become something I never thought I'd have, a home filled with love and laughter and the comfortable chaos of family life. The kids are planning to buy a house together, a big place where we can all live and where they can take care of me as I get older. It's not the traditional family arrangement, but it's ours, and it works for us. We've learned that family isn't about blood or biology. It's about choice and commitment and love. Linda sends the occasional Facebook message, usually when she's drunk or broke or both. She still claims I stole her children, still insists she was a victim of circumstances. But the kids block her messages now, tired of her manipulation and drama. They've learned to protect themselves from her toxicity. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd minded my own business that first night Marcus called me, scared and hungry. What if I'd told him to call 911 instead? What if I'd let the system handle it from the beginning? Would Linda have eventually gotten her act together? Would the kids have been better off with their biological mother? But then I look at these three amazing people who call me mom, who've overcome their traumatic childhood to become successful and happy adults. And I know I made the right choice. I didn't steal Linda's children. I saved them from a woman who saw them as burdens instead of blessings. The truth is on our side, and it always has been. We're a family by choice, bound not by blood, but by love, and that's the strongest foundation of all.